Colleagues, if you could start to take your seats, please, and insert your voting cards into the microphone. We're still a fair way from a quorum, but we will start as soon as we achieve that. Thank you. So we're nearly there with a quorum, but we need more people, so please sit down and insert your card in the microphone slot, please.
It's showing the right percentage now, though.
Yeah. We need one more party to insert their voting card, and then we're able to start. And the number's just gone down. So if any parties who haven't inserted the voting card, if they could do so as soon as possible. So good evening, colleagues, and a pleasure to welcome you to an action-packed evening. I'm sure you're all delighted to be here. It is an opportunity for us to make progress. Just so that you are all aware, we are continuing to work on the plant and tree species proposals this evening. So we're going to begin in a minute with proposal 47, move on to 49, 50, 51, and the related document 84.3, and then we will continue going back to the start with proposals 43 and the linked annex in document 85.1, proposal 45 with the link document in 84.4, and then ideally get to proposal 52. That may be ambitious for the evening, but we will go as quickly as we can with your cooperation, and hope we can make some good progress. So, without further ado, I would invite the India as the proponent, India and/or Nepal as the proponents of proposals 47 to introduce a proposal for Dalbergia Sisu. So if one of you, I see India, you have requested the floor. So India, please introduce the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. India on behalf of India and Nepal is pleased to present to the COP for adoption of CoP19 Proposal 47 to delete the species Dalbergia Sisu from Appendix 2 of the Convention. The species was listed on Appendix 2 as part of the listing of genus Dalbergia in 2016 at COP17. Chair, as detailed in the proposal, the species does not meet the listing criteria set out in paragraphs 2A or 2B of Article 2 of the Convention text, or the criteria set out in Annex 2A and Annex 2B of Resolution Conf 9.24 Rev COP 17. Dalbergia Sisu has a wide geographical range of distribution, and in the Indian subcontinent, it is found abundantly in the wild and in cultivation. The species has very fast growth rate and capacity to become naturalized outside of its native range, and is even invasive in some parts of the world. It is one of the most widely utilized plantation tree species in the Indian subcontinent, and its timber is used in making handicraft items, furniture, veneer plywood, and several other tools and artifacts. The impacts of both harvest and trade on wild population of Dalbergia Sisu are low, since harvest is being done mostly from the planted or cultivated trees which are freely available outside the natural forests. All natural forests in India are covered under scientifically prepared long-term management plans based on sustainable forest management principles, which are approved by the central government. The species is also supported by procedures and laws to regulate harvest of the natural population. India is net importer of timber. The main exports of Dalbergia Sisu are in the form of furniture and handicrafts. This is an economic activity that supports livelihoods of thousands of artisans, poor people, as well as farmers who have been growing the species as a part of agroforestry activities promoted by the government to generate additional income. This is an ideal example of sustainable utilization and trade, which was being done without any negative impact on the wild population of the species. The listing of a species on Appendix 2 and the consequent trade controls which have been imposed upon have had a serious impact on the sustainable utilization of this species. Since the listing, we estimate that export of Dalbergia Sisu handicrafts and furniture have fallen by almost 50%, with the consequent effects on the livelihoods of stakeholders in this trade. Coming to the issue of identification of Dalbergia Sisu, we have presented information on identification and differentiation of the species in Part 11 of our proposal. The species is identifiable using wood anatomical characters such as rays, end grains, and arrangement of vessels, wood density, and using methods such as spectrometry and gene sequencing. Chair, we take this opportunity to highlight the inconsistencies in the way in which the so-called look-alike criteria in paragraph 2b of Article 2 of the Convention has been used to list this entire genus of Dalbergia. The argument being used is that the form in which the species is traded, that is finished products in the nature of furniture and handicrafts, are indistinguishable at the point of customs below the genus level. We would also like to draw attention to the regulatory burden that this approach causes. When abundant and heavily traded species are included on Appendix 2, a large amount of resources in terms of time, money, and manpower have to be spent by parties on conducting NDFs, making legal acquisition findings, issuing permits, and enforcement action for a species which is otherwise not threatened in any way. For these reasons, we urge the parties to adopt a reasonable and tenable approach to interpreting paragraph 2b of Article 2 of the Convention when it comes to finished products of Dalbergia shishu wood. The use of look-alike criteria to list the species does not stand up to scrutiny and is not reasonable. Mr. Chair, to sum up, what an irony that rather than focusing in finding a technological and scientific solution for quick identification of the Dalbergia shishu timber and products, a blunt decision based on the look-alike criteria was taken to list it in the Appendix 2, jeopardizing livelihood of thousands of poor and marginal communities. The listing of such an abundant and important timber species is unprecedented. It is not justified given that the major range states for species are developing countries who rely on the species for sustainable development and agroforestry. We sincerely urge the parties to support our proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, India, for introducing the proposal. And with that, I open the floor for parties. I see Nepal as a co-proponent. If you want to make a brief addition to what India has said, you can have the floor, but after that, I will give the floor to the European Union, then Argentina. So, Nepal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Nepal is taking the floor for the first time in the plenary, I would like to congratulate Chair on your election, and Nepal also would like to extend our sincere gratitude to the government of the Panama for organizing this important event, and thanks for their warm hospitality. Nepal also appreciates CITES Secretariat for their hard work and excellent arrangement to conduct this CoP19. Mr. Chair, as a co-proponent of the Proposal 47, Nepal would like to support the India. In Nepal, Dalbergia shishu is considered as a fast-growing and multi-purpose perennial tree species, which is a part of local livelihoods and economically important species for its value in forestry, agroforestry, and horticulture. This species is sustainably utilized for its furniture, fuel wood, fodder, and etc. This species is lifeline to poor farmers by planting the trees in their own private land as a source of income and employment. This species has a wide range of distribution across the South Asia and other parts of the world at both wild and farmlands. As the species is easily propagated and fast-growing in nature, the poor and marginalized farmers are highly motivated towards this species. Farmers are highly motivated to plant this species aiming households' income. Nepal has its own forest act to regulate the trade of all tree species, including the species for biological sustainability. And Nepal is also one of the famous countries for community-based forest management, which respect the use rights and responsibilities of the indigenous people and local communities. Government of Nepal has been supporting the farmers and community forest user group by providing good quality seedlings free of cost for many decades. This species is the second most planted tree species in Nepal. Hundreds of thousands of small-scale farmers and community forest user groups are involved in the plantation and taking care of this species. With the very high quality of the wood, it is very much preferred species by manufacturing high quality furniture, best quality flooring and paneling, as well as making musical instruments. Thousands of the small and medium-sized furniture industries, wood carvers and artisans have been engaged. The continuation of the Dalbergia sissu into the appendix second of the CITES list, it has negative impacts on the cultivation of the species, jeopardizing the livelihoods of the thousands of the small-scale farmers, tree growers, nursery entrepreneurs, and artisans. Once one of the most preferred plantation species has been now among the least chosen species for the plantation, both by the farmers and tree growers and authorities. In these connections, Nepal joined hand with India, requesting all parties to support our proposal to delist the species from Appendix 2. We ensure all parties on that the delisting of the species will not at any means jeopardize the wild population, rather support in mass cultivation of the species and promote livelihoods of the thousands of small-scale farmers and artisans, including indigenous people and local communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nepal. And give the floor now to Nepal, followed by Argentina, then Bangladesh.
Thank you, Chair. I think you meant the European Union. So the European Union and its member states take note of the proposal from India and Nepal to delete Dalbergia sissu from CITES Appendix 2. We share the view of the proponents that the species doesn't meet the criteria laid down in paragraph 2A of Article 2 of the Convention. However, a listing is also justified by fulfilling the criteria laid down in paragraph 2B of Article 2. Annex 2B of Resolution 9.24 of CoP19 explains what is usually referred to as lookalike criterion. The main aspect of the explanation is that resemblance with species meeting criterion 2A of Article 2 of the Convention is in such a way that enforcement officers who encounter specimens of CITES listed species are unlikely to be able to distinguish between them. We take note of the fact that the species can be easily identified as a living organism. However, this is not the way specimens are usually presented to enforcement officers. The proposal states rightly that differentiation from 4 other species of the genus Dalbergia is possible. However, the genus comprises of several hundred species and not of 4. The proponents also argue with gene sequencing and mass spectrometry. Both techniques are definitely not available to enforcement officers. Therefore, they don't help in this case. The EU and its member states are grateful for additional information provided by India in a bilateral communication on the identification of Dalbergia sissu. However, they didn't bring any new insight in how enforcement officers could differentiate from lookalike species, especially for semi-finished and/or manufactured wood products. With a lot of interest, we have read in the proposal about potential applications of other analytical instruments. We invite the proponents to further explore these seemingly easy-to-handle instruments and to provide the proof that they would help in distinguishing between Dalbergia sissu and the rest of the genus. For the time being, the EU and its member states consider the criterion 2B of Article 2 of the Convention to be met and therefore oppose the proposal to delete Dalbergia sissu from Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. EU, I give the floor to Argentina, then Bangladesh, then Canada.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. With regards to Proposal 47 to remove this proposal, the Dalbergia agenda are small trees. Many of them have very high quality woods that can be traded and used in the making of luxury furniture and instruments. Many of these species are threatened because of their overexploitation. Due to this, during the 17th Conference of the Parties in Johannesburg between the 24th of September to the 4th of October 2016, there was a proposal for the listing of all species of the Dalbergia in the CITES Convention. This includes Dalbergia sissu, with the exception of those which were already in Appendix 1. This proposal was approved and the proponents were Argentina, Brazil, Guatemala and Kenya. It was proposal number 55. All the Dalbergia genera was included because of the difficulty of identifying the different woods of lookalike species. What hasn't changed and is still being implemented, if we remove Dalbergia sisu, that would complicate hugely the efforts of customs authorities. So this proposal of removing was already introduced by India as Proposal 51 in CoP18 organized in Geneva in August 2019, and it was rejected. Although Dalbergia sisu is one of the most common species and does not have any major conservation issues, if we remove it from the appendix, this would create a void and a channel of trade that could be used by the illegal trade to trade other woods as if they were Dalbergia sisu. India also has a reserve for has an exemption for Dalbergia sisu, and this has as a consequence that the country not be considered as a party to the convention in the implementation of this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I give the floor to Bangladesh, then Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Bangladesh appreciates the India's proposal for delisting from Appendix 2. Dalbergia sisu is the fast growing perennial tree which is economically important for its value in plantation forestry, agroforestry and horticulture in Bangladesh. This species is also sustainably utilized for its timber, fuelwood, fodder and medicines in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh supports the India's proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh. I give the floor to Canada, then Bhutan.
Thank you, Chair. Canada regrets that it must oppose Proposal CoP19, Proposal 47. We believe that the proponents have not presented evidence that would support the removal from Appendix 2 of Dalbergia sisu, which at COP17 was listed as a lookalike species. Canada sees no indication in the proposal that suggests Dalbergia sisu can be readily differentiated from other Dalbergia species using methods that are readily available to customs and enforcement officers. Further, as India and Nepal, the co-proponents, have not submitted a formal proposal to amend COP18 Prop 57, the COP18 listing that currently regulates all Dalbergia species under the revised annotation #15, excepting Dalbergia nigra, which is listed on Appendix 1, the procedural method by which Dalbergia sisu alone may be delisted is unclear. Canada believes that removal of Dalbergia sisu from Appendix 2, making it the only Dalbergia species unregulated by CITES, could facilitate illegal trade by allowing other Dalbergia species to be falsely identified as Dalbergia sisu and traded without permits. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I give the floor now to Bhutan.
Thank you, Chair. As the State Party of Bhutan is taking the floor for the first time, I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate you on your appointment as the committee chair and also thank the Panama government and the CITES Secretariat for the excellent organization of this conference. The State Party of Bhutan appreciates the sentiments behind India and Nepal's proposal. The species Dalbergia sisu does not appear to be threatened in any way, and since there are obvious livelihood issues at stake, we feel that COP should be sensitive to those concerns. Chair, we propose that as a way forward, rather than deleting Dalbergia sisu from Appendix 2, the COP may consider an amendment to Annotation 15 to address the issues raised by India and Nepal in their proposal. Specifically, we suggest that Annotation 15 be amended to add the following paragraph as paragraph F, that is, open quote, small letter f, finished furniture and handicraft products of Dalbergia sisu when first exported from India and Nepal, Close quote. Thank you, Chair.
Something about me creating interference with the microphone. Thank you, Bhutan, for that. But could you just explain again and slowly what your precise amendment is?
Thank you, Chair. Annotation, referring to annotation paragraph F, open quote, small letter F, finished furniture and handicraft products of Dalbergia Sisu when first exported from India and Nepal, and close the quote.
Okay, thank you, Nepal. I think Bhutan, sorry. I think we have captured that. I now give the floor to Sri Lanka. So, Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Sri Lanka notes that this is the second consecutive COP at which India and Nepal have raised the issue of Dalbergia Sisu and the difficulties caused by its listing on Appendix 2. It is clear that these range states feel strongly about the subject, and their proposal makes clear that the species is abundant and does not by itself qualify for listing on CITES Appendix 2. In the spirit of cooperation, we support the suggestion that annotation 15, which applies to the Dalbergia Appendix 2 listing, be amended to include a suitable exception for finished furniture and handicraft products exported from India and Nepal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sri Lanka. I don't have any more requests from parties, so I will open the floor for any interventions from observers. Okay, I see IWMC, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Simply to say that this proposal is valid in the sense that it will help the livelihood and food security of the people. So for that reason only, that proposal shall be accepted and adopted.
Thank you, IWMC. I also now see WWF.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the reasons eloquently explained by the European Union, Argentina, Canada, and others, we would recommend that parties reject this proposal. We don't take any pleasure in making this recommendation, nor do we take pleasure in quoting Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., but his maxim remains valid. Hard cases make bad law. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got no further requests for the floor, so I'll just consider the best way forward. Thank you. One moment. Thank you. We're just having a discussion about whether the proposed amendment increases the scope or not. And after a bit of discussion, then we're satisfied that it doesn't. I would quite like to go back to India and Nepal as co-proponents as to what you feel about this proposed amendment and whether you would accept that as co-proponents as an amendment of your proposal. I see India requesting the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment in the form of annotation as proposed by Bhutan and supported by Sri Lanka will greatly help to solve this issue and problem in our country, and the livelihoods of majority of people who are dependent upon these resources will be supported by this amendment. So we can accept that. Thank you.
Thank you, India. So you could accept that as an amendment to your proposal. I'd quite like to hear from Nepal as your co-proponent, what they feel. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As India said, the species is directly related to the poor and marginalized communities, particularly indigenous people and local communities. Nepal also accept the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
So the proposal having been, the proposed amendment having been accepted by the co-proponents, then falls under Rule 24.2, and so we have an amended proposal. Now, the original proposal had a number of parties, including the EU and its 27 member states, not supporting the original proposal, so it'd be quite useful to hear from them whether this amendment, this amended proposal we have now, would be acceptable to them. But I see United Kingdom requesting the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United Kingdom aligns with the EU, Argentina, and Canada in that the species meets the lookalike criterion for listing in Appendix 2. We oppose the proposed amendment to Annotation 15, Paragraph F. We cannot agree to this as implementation would prove extremely difficult to establish clear supply chains and country of origin and open up potential loopholes for all furniture and handicrafts of any Dobbergia species. Thank you.
Thank you, UK, and give the floor to the European Union now.
Thank you, Chair, and we align ourselves with the comment made by UK.
Thank you, European Union. I now see Australia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Australia would like to align itself with the previous comments from the EU and the UK.
Thank you, Australia. So there remains no consensus and a degree of opposition to this proposal. I don't have any more requests for the floor. And given that opposition, I'll give the proponents a final chance to say what they would like to do next. Knowing that there is some opposition, what do you want to do? We could take this to a vote, of course, but I'd like to hear your perspective. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there is no option left other than voting. We'll go for the voting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, India. In which case, to resolve this issue, we will take this to a vote. So, if we can start to prepare ourselves for a vote. So, One moment. So we're voting on proposal 47. We're about to, and just to clarify what we are voting on, a suggested amendment was put forward by Bhutan to change annotation #15 with the text that we have already read out. Both co-proponents, India and Nepal, accepted that as an amendment to their proposal, and so when we begin the voting process, we would be voting on that. I haven't actually started the voting procedure yet. I'm just trying to clarify what we're voting on, but I see a request from Argentina, so you can have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chair. We have a question in terms of procedure. It's not clear to us if we can change an annotation at this point.
Well, we're dealing here. You've got your button pressed again, Argentina. Do you still want the floor? No, okay. Thank you. We're dealing with an amendment to the appendices, and that is what is taking place here with this suggested amendment to provide a new paragraph F to annotation #15. So it seems in order to me. So I don't see any more requests for the floor. So I'm now going to Cameroon. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. I would like every time that there's a vote, if we could be reminded of exactly what we're covering in the vote. Could we do that?
Thank you, Cameroon. I will endeavour to do that. So we're now going to vote on proposal 47, which the co-proponents have accepted an amendment to their proposal under Rule 24.2. They therefore propose to amend the annotation #15 applying to Dalbergia Sisu with text which reads from my notes, but I'm sure we've captured it correctly, a new paragraph F, finished furniture and handicraft products of Dalbergia Sisu when first exported from India and Nepal. And that's, I think, the text that was proposed. So that is what we are going to be voting on. This will be a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. It's a substantive matter, so it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. If you vote yes, you will be voting in favour of the amended proposal from India and Nepal, and if you vote no, you are voting against it. So I'm just going to make sure that we're ready to undertake a vote and make sure all delegates are at their seats. And that seems to be the case, I think, and I will check with the technicians that we're ready to do a vote.
We are prepared, Chairman.
Thank you. So, parties, you have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. Technicians, if you could display the vote on the screen, please. As you can see, the proposal failed to get a two-thirds majority, and so the recommendation from this committee is that this amended proposal is not adopted. I have a request from the floor from Guinea. Is that a deliberate request, or? And we can clear the screen now. I beg your pardon. We need to show the list of votes so that parties can check that their voting was correct. So I think we've all had one loop of the complete voting record, so I think we can remove that now from the screen. Thank you. So with that, we now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is Proposal 49, Pau Brasilia Echinata, and the proponent is Brazil. And I invite Brazil to introduce their proposal. You have the floor, Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor once again. As proponents, Brazil would like to introduce the proposal for the transfer of Pau Brasilia Echinata, or Pau Brasil, as we call it in Brazil, in our country, or Pernambuco, from CITES Appendix 2 to CITES Appendix 1, with the annotation all parts, derivatives, and finished products, including bowls of music instruments, except musical instruments and their parts, composing traveling orchestras, and solo musicians carrying musical passports in accordance with Resolution 16.8. Pau Brasil is a symbol of our country. Our country owes its name to this tree. The species is endemic to the tropical forests of the Atlantic forest, which is located in the most populated regions of our territory and is under constant anthropic pressure. Currently, the Atlantic forest maintains only 12.4% of its original forest coverage, which makes it one of the most threatened forest areas on the planet. Since 2006, the Atlantic forest is protected by specific legislation in our country, which provides for extremely restrictive rules for the exploitation of its natural resources. Like the biome itself, natural populations of Pau Brasilia Echinata are fragmented. Years of intense exploitation of the tree, initially to obtain dyes and later for the music industry, combined with the intense occupation on the coastal areas, led to the fragmentation of natural populations, to the drastic reduction of populations, and also to the complete elimination of the species in several places where historically they were abundant. Today, the population structure of Pau Brasil is small and restricted to certain areas of our territory, with a low density of mature individuals. The most recent National Forest Inventory, carried out by the Brazilian Forest Service, indicates that no species of Pau Brasilia were found in sampled areas in many Brazilian regions where the species had once been common and abundant. Not without reason, in 1992, the species was included in the official list of species of Brazilian flora threatened with extinction in the category endangered. Moreover, in 2007, Pau-Brasilia echinata was included in CITES Appendix 2 with annotation #10, which basically excludes international trade of bows for musical instruments from the control of our CITES authorities. The use of pau-brasil for musical purposes began in the mid-18th century due to its physical mechanical characteristics that provide it with excellent sound. Today, pau-brasil wood is appreciated worldwide as the best wood to produce stringed music instruments bows. Present-day Brazilian national legislation only allows the harvest and trade of these trees if they come from plantations for commercial purpose or from stocks that pre-existing the inclusion on CITES Appendix 2. However, despite all the legal protection applied to the species, there are still evidence of selective illegal logging of centenary trees, including inside environmental protected areas, to meet the international demand for bows for musical instruments. Just to exemplify, in a recent operation involving the Brazilian Federal Policy and the Brazilian CITES Management Authority, more than 200 unlicensed short logs of pau-brasilia, as well as all the stocks of rods of the arch-producing companies have been seized. Data collected by IBAMA, which is our CITES authority, in recent years indicate that at least that in the last 20 years, almost 100,000 pieces of bow blanks and bows have been sold abroad. The main consumer countries of Brazil wood raw material are the USA, Japan, Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, Portugal, Italy, and France. It's clear thus that current protection of pau-brasilia under Appendix 2 of CITES has not been efficient, particularly due to annotation 10. The exemption from CITES permits of the aforementioned bows for musical instruments allows for trade of wood from illegal origin, increasing pressure on a species already considered endangered. To conclude, Mr. Chair, Brazil understands that it's undeniable that international trade is contributing decisively to threaten the existence of this species. It's out of question that there is strong scientific evidence that pau-brasilia echinata meets the biological criteria described at Resolution CONF 9.24 Rev CoP17 for Appendix 1, either by criteria A, small wide in population with an observed, inferred, or projected decline in the number of individuals or the area and quality of the habitat. A5, small wide population with a high vulnerability to either intrinsic or extrinsic factors. B3, wide population with a restricted area of distribution with a high vulnerability to either intrinsic or extrinsic factors. And B4, wide population with a restricted area of distribution with an observed, inferred, or projected decrease in the area of distribution, the area of habitat, the number of subpopulations, and the number of individuals. We therefore urge the parties to this convention to engage on helping us to protect this species that's part of our national identity by approving Proposal 49. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your introduction, Brazil. And with that, I open the floor for parties. And can I ask observers not to press the buttons yet? I haven't opened the floor to them. So I'll give the floor to begin with to Panama, and then the European Union, then Argentina. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Having heard the proposal from Brazil, Panama is aware of the harm that the species has suffered, and given that it's endemic and that it cannot be found anywhere else in the world, Panama supports the proposal.
Thank you, Panama. I give the floor to the European Union, followed by Argentina and the United States.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states agree that increased control of trade in this species is necessary to tackle the current issue of laundering of wild-sourced finished bows into trade. However, the annotation as suggested by the proponent is not acceptable to us. There are also doubts on whether any annotation for an Appendix 1 listing would be acceptable at all. Deleting the annotation would increase the scope of the proposal, which, according to the rules of procedure, is not possible. There are millions of finished bows of stringed instruments of various ages and a lot of international movement and commercial trade. The vast majority of this movement is of no concern or has no conservation impact on the species. There's currently no way to verify that the instrument or bow for which a permit has been issued is the exact same bow or instrument for which a re-export permit would be sought for. It is therefore not feasible to control finished bows which can exist for hundreds of years. In order to find a solution that provides the necessary protection for the species and level of control for those commodities that enter the international trade for the first time, and on the other hand, avoid complex administration, we suggest the following annotation for Pau Brasilia echinata under Appendix 2. And I quote, all parts, derivatives, and finished products, full stop, re-export of finished musical instruments and finished musical instrument accessories is exempt from the listing. We propose to discuss this with the proponent and other parties within an in-session working group with the aim to find a solution and to agree on the best way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, but I think we need you to repeat that proposed annotation again, really. I certainly didn't capture it, so if you could read it out again more slowly, please.
Sure. So, all parts, comma, derivatives, and finished products, full stop. Re-export of finished musical instruments and finished musical instrument accessories is exempt from the listing.
Thank you. I think we've got that, EU. Just thank you for that suggested amendment, European Union, which of course we can discuss, and I heard your suggestion to try and find an agreement with the proponents. So I'll now give the floor to Argentina, followed by the United States, followed by Guatemala.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Argentina, in principle, supports this proposal, but we are going to be very attentive to how this new annotation goes forward by annotation by the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. Argentina. I give the floor United States of America, Guatemala, and then Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States has heard Brazil's concern and shares Brazil's concern for this species. And given that it would be contrary to the convention to annotate an Appendix 1 species, we find that the current annotation #10 with the species in Appendix 2 is not effective in addressing the illegal trade. However, we would support amending the current annotation to address what we understand to be the conservation concern for this important species. And therefore, we have a suggested amended annotation to propose that is different from the EU one. The amended annotation we propose would read, all parts and derivatives except finished bows for stringed musical instruments when transported only for purposes of personal use, performance, display, or competition. We are aware of documented illegal commercial activity, as Brazil has reported, originating in countries outside of Brazil, including outside of South America. Our proposed annotation would be more precautionary than the current annotation #10 by requiring CITES permits for all commercial trade in the species, while creating an exception for travel by orchestras and musicians. We would support a small group of parties getting together with the proponent, Brazil, here to find a solution and a way forward if we were given some time. Perhaps overnight, tomorrow, we could discuss this. But if not, we would like our amended annotation to also be considered. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, United States. I think for us to consider your annotation, we need it read out again a bit more slowly because I couldn't write fast enough. So one more time, please.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. The amended annotation would read, all parts and derivatives, except finished bows for stringed musical instruments when transported only for purposes of personal use, performance, display, or competition.
Thank you, United States. So we've captured that, and another annotation to consider, and I also note your suggestion about having some kind of group. But I'll continue to take the remainder of the interventions and see where we end up. But first on my list is Guatemala, followed by Japan, then Israel.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Guatemala values the concerns brought forward by Brazil, and as such, as Argentina has said, in principle, we would support this proposal. But we will be very attentive to the new amendments or proposals that are being made by the EU and the USA on the annotations, and will be attentive to the different discussions, in particular the proponent's opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Guatemala. I give the floor to Japan, then Israel, then the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. Japan recognizes that efforts and concerns of the government of Brazil regarding Power Brasilia. However, Japan is of the view that such concerns will be addressed in Annex 2. When considering the replacement of the current annotation number 10, appropriate protection of species and social and cultural factors must be balanced. In particular, it is important that musicians be guaranteed to perform abroad and bring their bows back safely. We support the EU proposal from this perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. I give the floor to Israel, then the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. We understand from this proposal, and we've heard from Brazil, their concerns with an endemic, iconic species being in trade illegally and seeking assistance from this body to increase protection. And in general, when a country proposes an endemic species that's only in their land and looking for help from the convention, then we would generally want to see how we can find the best way to assist in the conservation and protection of this species. We are, as others have said, not convinced that the Appendix 1 listing with this amended annotation is the best way to achieve that goal. The species has this hashtag 10 annotation right now. It's the only species in the entire appendices with annotation hashtag 10. So all the power is here available to try and see how to amend either the annotation or the control features of this species by the party with the help here of the other ones who have spoken. Of what we've heard, we liked the annotation amendment by the USA perhaps better than the one by EU, but we think that it would really be useful to have a small drafting party get together with Brazil to assist Brazil in finding the way to put forward a proposal that will achieve the goal without getting into issues of annotations in Appendix 1 and risks of difficulties in that direction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel. I give the floor to United Kingdom and then Canada.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of brevity, the UK agrees with the way forward proposed by the EU. The UK has concerns over how the Appendix 2 annotation proposed by the amendment proposed by the US would be implemented in practice. We would be open to the consideration of an improved Appendix 2 annotation and would like to be involved in any drafting or working group formed. Thank you.
Thank you, UK, and then Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Canada would like to align itself with the positions expressed by the EU, the United States, Japan, and Israel. We too have some wording we think might be useful for an amendment to annotation #10, and we would be very interested to participate in a working group should that be put together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I see Australia has requested the floor, and after that I'll seek, unless there are no more parties, seek any interventions from observers, but I haven't opened the floor yet from observers. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Australia would like to align itself with the EU, the UK and others, and would be interested in joining the working group.
Thank you. Okay, I now open the floor to observers. So we have a few requests here. If, of course, observers could be brief, that would be helpful. So I see first the International Association of Violin Bow Makers.
Thank you, Chair.
As this is our first time taking the floor, we'd like to thank Panama for this beautifully hosted conference of the parties. I'm offering comments on behalf of the International Alliance of Violin and Bow Makers for Endangered Species, the International Society of Violin and Bow Makers, and the International Pernambuco Conservation Initiative. The membership of these organizations comprises artisanal bow makers from across the United States, Europe, and Asia. The organizations I represent fully agree with Brazil that the illegal trafficking of Pau Brasilia echinata absolutely must be stopped. Wild populations of Pernambuco must be expanded and never touched. As the parties weigh the best policy solution, we'd like to note the following. Only Pernambuco bows create the quality of sound we hear when we listen to professional and advanced musicians playing stringed instrument music. There is no substitute. Music is global. Musicians cross borders not only to perform, but also to buy, sell, and have their bows repaired by master bow makers. It is essential, therefore, that musicians have the ability to engage in both commercial and non-commercial trade. Bows remain in trade for decades, if not centuries. Because it was never required, documentation about the origin of a bow will very often not exist. For this reasons, an Appendix 1 listing or the imposition of Appendix 2 permit requirements for finished bows would have a devastating effect on stringed instrument music, whether classical, traditional Irish music, jazz, or another form. It is hard to identify the conservation benefit that will come from repeatedly requiring permits for the hundreds of thousands of bows already in trade. It is easier to foresee a flood of permit requests by musicians and makers struggling to provide documentation. Priceless bows would needlessly disappear from trade or fall into disrepair. We saw the tremendously burdensome and unintended consequences that followed after rosewood was listed during CoP19. We respectfully urge the parties not to go down that same road. For more than 20 years, bow makers have worked with the Brazilian government and partners in Brazil to conserve Pernambuco. We have a detailed strategy for the future that includes replanting, science, and legal compliance initiatives such as exploring schemes for traceability, tagging or stamping, and certification. We also believe the creation of a legal framework for sustainable use of the quality Pernambuco that is today growing on private plantations would be a vitally important addition to Brazil's sustainable management program for the species. The bow makers I represent are upholding a cultural tradition more than 200 years old. Their bows create stringed instrument music that uplifts the human spirit. We urge the parties to seek a balanced policy solution that will conserve both Pau Brasilia echinata and the art of stringed instrument music. And we would greatly appreciate participating in any working group on behalf of the bow making community. Thank you.
Thank you. International Association of Violin Makers. I now give the floor to IWMC, to be followed by League of American Orchestras, I think, and CSFI. IWMC, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of IWMC and several other organizations, the name of which will be provided to the Secretariat. There's always a shiver running down my spine when I hear the European Union's anthem, especially when it is being performed live as Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, Fourth Movement. And I'm not the only one enjoying live concerts, but many others as well. But for many listeners of classical music, it is also the quality that counts. And this quality is achieved by the unparalleled characteristics of Brazelwood. Unfortunately, international performing orchestras might disappear in the back mirror of history if musicians face more and more difficulties in traveling internationally, in purchasing their bows from abroad, or in having their bows repaired abroad because of CITES regulations. Yes, there is the musical passport, but in the end, this de facto permit system is further exacerbated by additional administrative, logistical, and financial burdens of an Appendix 1 listing of Brazelwood if adopted. The untrained ear might not hear a difference, but high-quality live performances are to a large extent dependent on equally high-quality bows made of Brazelwoods for violins, violas, violoncellos, and double basses. The proposal before us essentially aims to shut down all international commercial trade in this species. Needless to say, Mr. Chair, we urge parties to reject the proposal to include Brazelwood in Appendix 1 and leave its status untouched in order not to jeopardize hundreds of years of cultural history, the livelihoods of millions of musicians and bow makers worldwide, and the ability of hundreds of millions of people to experience and enjoy the incredible life experience of the Ode to Joy. Thank you.
Thank you, IWMC. I give the floor now to League of American Orchestras, then CSFI, and then SSN, and that's it. But please, we've heard quite a number of arguments now. If you could keep your interventions very brief so that we can sum up and try to move on. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The following comments are offered on behalf of the global musicians' unions, performing arts organizations, and music makers that are represented by the 55 organizations included in Information Document 53. Bows made from Pernambuco are used extensively by professional musicians and advanced students, performing with stringed instruments in a wide variety of music styles. And they have been in trade long before the species initially came under CITES controls. They are sold, resold, and repaired with great frequency and cross borders very often during the bow's long lifespan. Because controls have not historically applied to these bows as finished products, documentation is not readily accessible by all existing owners, despite these being highly valued tools of the trade worldwide. A new commercial or non-commercial CITES permit requirement for all existing Pernambuco bows traded and repaired internationally would place an extreme and in some cases insurmountable burden on musicians and management authorities alike. Our national and international music associations inform musicians worldwide about actions they can take to support conservation and also provide critical training for complying with CITES controls. Musicians and music ensembles are represented here at COP19 to contribute our direct experience with the implementation of CITES policies that are presently being navigated by musicians worldwide. We stand ready to engage with CITES and global management authorities on this issue towards a balanced policy solution, and we offer our partnership and participation in any working group formed. Thank you.
I'll give the floor to SSN, then CSFI. We've heard quite a number of arguments. If you could keep your interventions brief, and so we can bring this to a conclusion. SSN, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of Defenders of Wildlands and the Species Survival Network. Firstly, we would like to thank Brazil for the presentation of this proposal. This proposal and this endemic species of Brazil is in the Appendix 2 since 2007 with annotation 10. And what we are seeing now is that is not sufficient to protect the species. This is one of the most clear cases we have seen of a species that clearly meets all criteria to be listed in Appendix 1. Sovereign and free countries, parties to this convention, have all the right to protect their endemic species in the best way possible in order to avoid that these species enter the international illicit trade and as a consequence have an impact on their conservation. And we therefore invite all parties to support this proposal, which once again, I would like to say importantly, is endemic to Brazil, and that since 1978 has been declared officially as the Brazilian national tree. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, SSN. I give the floor to CSFI. You have the floor.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to speak on behalf of the SFI CAFE, as well as all musicians and orchestras of the music world, as well as craftsmanship and small companies that have mobilized in Europe, having found out about provision for Proposal 49. We have worked with the League of American Orchestras and many other organizations of the music and instrument. The Pernambuco is the national tree of Brazil, and it's a great national symbol that we must protect in order to make sure that for years to come it'll be able to continue growing. We firmly condemn all illicit activities that put this species in danger, the forest where this tree grows, as well as our activities. We are committed in the preservation of Pernambuco. The bows manufactured today have to fulfill all sustainable criteria. We are ready to accept and adopt the necessary protocols, but countries need access to a sustainable resource. The commitment for decades on their protection is clear, and we are committed to make sure that the new bows be manufactured with these trees, and we will continue working and maintaining our efforts. But we also have to understand that the decisions on which you're working have to take into account that Brazil, what is long-lasting wood, and so bows and instruments that were manufactured years ago are still being used. So we must take into account that musicians need to be able to acquire them, use them, play music with them, and take them with them on trips in order to maintain them, and one day maybe sell them or pass them over to other musicians. Therefore, imposing thousands of permits and licenses is an incredible administrative burden that brings no benefit to the species, and this puts on hold the livelihoods of many musicians. We would like to invite parties to give a sufficient time to make sure that a text that is in favor of all parties be able to be agreed upon. Thank you.
Thank you, CSFI. So we've heard quite a range of interventions now, and I'll go back to Brazil in a moment. It does seem to be that there is a great desire to achieve consensus, and that this seems that it might be possible by looking at a revised annotation, perhaps with the species remaining in Appendix 2. So I'm happy to look at creating a group of some kind, if that seems to be the best way forward, but I'll ask Brazil for their reflections on what they've heard and whether they would see that as an acceptable way forward. Brazil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brazil would like just to make some reactions on what we've heard. And from the outset, Brazil is happy to note that, apart perhaps from Israel, no questions regarding the presence of the criteria for inclusion in Appendix 1 have been raised from the floor. And that's a good starting point on this discussion. Indeed, all the doubts that have been raised are of a procedural nature, of a commercial nature, and relate to the international trade in bows. Regarding the impossibility of applying annotation, in Appendix 1, I might say that I'm not an expert on CITES rules, but as a former lawyer, it seems to me that that's more an interpretation than a prescriptive rule. Another brief comment is that Brazil, of course, do not want music and musicians to disappear, nor that the EU anthem or any other anthem is no longer listened by its citizens. However, we also cannot admit that this beautiful art continues to contribute decisively to the extinction of the tree that symbolizes our country, which is exactly what is currently happening. And in any case, Mr. Chair, Brazil is open to work together with other parties on a working group on how to find ways to increase the protection of our pau-brasil. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Will you just give me a moment? Did you want the floor again, Brazil? You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just forgot, just a quick, brief comment. If possible, if a working group is created, I don't know if it's possible that someone from the enforcement staff of the Secretariat, if someone could join us to help us think about measures, enforcement measures. So I don't know if it's possible, but if possible, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
I think there will always, Secretariat are confirming that there will always be a Secretariat presence in the working group that can help. Excuse me, I can't say whether it would be from the enforcement unit, but we can look at making sure that you get the best person to provide you at the group with advice. So I am going to create a working group. I'm going to limit it to all those who have spoken this evening. So it would include Brazil, Panama, European Union, Argentina, United States, Guatemala, Japan, Israel, United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. And then we had the International Association of Violin Makers, IWMC, the League of American Orchestras, CSFI, and I think that's it, yeah. And SSN, okay, I missed SSN, I beg your pardon. And I think the terms of reference really for the working group are to seek or to consider whether consensus is possible on a possible amendment to Proposal 49. Hold on, let me think of the wording just to get it right. Yeah, so we'll just leave it very simply. For the working group to go away and see if there is a scope to seek consensus on a possible amendment to Proposal 49 on PAO Brasilia. So with that, I will, and if people are content, we will, of course, post details of the working group. I see Israel, you've raised your flag.
Thank you, Chair. Just to help the working group move a little more efficiency, we think it should be smaller than that, so we would prefer not to be on the working group, please.
Okay, thank you, Israel. And again, it's not compulsory, and the working group will probably be more efficient the smaller it is. So I've read out a list of names, no minus Israel. There's a suggested term, there is a terms of reference. We don't have a chair. I'm going to ask Australia, would you be willing to chair this?
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Australia could chair that one.
Thank you very much. Very grateful for that, especially as clearly we've not had a chance to consider that in advance or to give you advance warning. So if you allow me to just get my papers together, but we will shortly open Proposal 50. Colleagues, we're now on to Proposal 50, which has been submitted by Côte d'Ivoire, the European Union, Liberia, Malawi, Senegal, and Togo, and it's for the inclusion of all African populations of Pterocarpus in Appendix 2, but I'll let the proponents explain in detail their proposal. So I invite one of you to introduce it, and I see Senegal have requested the floor. So Senegal, if you could introduce Proposal 50. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to present the proposal on the inclusion of all African populations of Pterocarpus species in Appendix 2 of CITES. As you have said, the co-authors of this proposal are the European Union, Liberia, Mali, Togo, and Senegal. The species are present in a great variety of habitats throughout West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa. At least 5 of these African species of the Pterocarpus genus produce rosewood or other precious hardwoods, and they are traded under the name of Padouk. The range, states, and distribution of the Pterocarpus in Africa are fragmented, and the main reasons are the massive use and the effects of climate change. These play a major ecological role in ecosystems, in particular for carbon sequestration, in the fertilization of soils and feeding domestic animals, and also for wild animals. For Pterocarpus erinaceus, several parts are used in West Africa and are supportive for nests. It has been classed since in critical danger by IUCN since 2016. This includes 12 species, and 12 are in the database of African plants, and they're also in the online databases. Whatever the reference databases, 2 of these, in particular Pterocarpus erinaceus and Pterocarpus tinctorius, are already listed in Appendix 2. Following recent consultations with nomenclature specialists, including CITES nomenclature specialists, before the preparation of this proposal, we suggest that we look at the Plants of the World Online Q database as the standard reference for nomenclature. And we can see that trade of rosewood has increased a great deal in recent decades, and they are targeted to meet the growing demand for rosewood and other precious woods on the international markets. Aware of the insufficient data on African populations of Pterocarpus, recent studies have shown a decline or unstable population across all African populations. In addition to Pterocarpus erinaceus that's already listed in Appendix 2, others exist, such as the Pterocarpus tesmani and rotifolius that meet the criterion B of Resolution Conf 9.24 CoP17 for listing in Appendix 2. When it comes to the difficulties of identifying it at species level, they meet the criteria for similarity, and all the African species also meet criteria A of Annex 2B of Resolution 9.4 COP17. In accordance with the spirit of Resolution 9.24, Annex 2A, Criterion B, this listing would allow the maintenance of the Pterocarpus to ensure it cannot be threatened. So, aware that certain range states may need further time to implement this proposal, in particular the carrying out the national inventories of the species and making NDFs, we could suggest an option of an implementation that will be differed. So in Proposal 15, we could put forward the proposal to include African populations with annotation 16, which refers to logs, sawn wood, veneer sheets, plywood, and transformed wood, in order to work on conserving the wild populations. And we'd also like to remind the CITES communities that an listing in Appendix 2 is not a prohibition, but it is a way of ensuring the legality, traceability, and sustainability of a species. Thank you.
So thank you for your introduction, Senegal. I now open the floor for parties to comment. Okay, I see Mauritania, then Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you, Chair. Given that it is the first time I take the floor in this committee, my country, Mauritania, would like to thank the government of Panama and all of its people for the warm welcome that we have received. And it's also an opportunity to thank the Secretariat for having made available all the conditions for us to be able to work in the best conditions. It's also an opportunity to congratulate you, Chair, on your election to chair this committee. In relation to this proposal, Mauritania supports it most firmly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauritania. I give the floor to Togo, then Cameroon.
Okay. Merci.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Togo is a co-proponent of this proposal. And since 2013, Togo has had a moratorium on the species of Pterocarpus because it was so subject to illicit harvesting. So in Togo, the harvesting may possibly restart from 2026. The listing of a species in Appendix 2 is a measure for the sustainable management of a resource. So please allow us to call for the support of many countries for the protection and sustainable management of this African species. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. I give the floor to Cameroon, followed by Niger.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for giving us the floor. In addition to the position that Cameroon has already shared this morning, I'd also like to add some more elements. In Cameroon, we have 3 species of Pterocarpus. We have the Kosso, Padouk, and the white Padouk and the red Padouk. The assessments and analysis we've made is that the level of exploitation of these species has remained more or less constant over the last 6 years. And the management and is based on the principles of sustainable management. When it comes to these species, when it comes to the Padouk rouge, the red Padouk, this is amongst the 15 most used woods. They represent around 4% of our national production in 2019, and individually, each of these 10 represent less than 1%. The red Padouk is estimated at around 2%. The use of forests in our permanent area is subject to the drawing up of management plans to ensure that the potential of the various species and their population structure is used in the setting of the plans. And this is based on what the existing plants, and we look at the limits for the diameter for harvesting. When it comes to the Kosso species, which is in our existing forests in the Sahel regions of Cameroon, and bearing in mind the various pressures on the species, we have taken a number of measures to protect it. And there is a quota that is allocated at a ministerial level. So Cameroon is in favor of listing this in Annex 2, but for the other Pterocarpus species, we remain against the full listing. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. So I give the floor to Niger, followed by the Gambia.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Please allow us to congratulate the proponent states for this proposal, and we'd like to give them our support for the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Niger, I give the floor to the Gambia, followed by Nigeria and Benin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kia, for giving me the floor once again. I would like to begin by saying that considering the ecological importance of pterocarpus species in Africa, as well as the socio-economic importance of these species for our local community and the state cannot be overemphasized. Therefore, listing all the African species of pterocarpus in CITES Appendix 2 will only will only enhance the sustainable management and utilization of these species. Therefore, Mr. Chair, the Gambia support this proposal in order to ensure the listing of the all pterocarpus species in CITES Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you. The Gambia, I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Benin, followed by Burkina Faso.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I also want to join my voice to say congratulations to those that submitted this proposal, and that Nigeria is in full support of the listing of all pterocarpus species. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Nigeria, I give the floor to Benin, followed by followed by Burkina Faso, then Guinea-Bissau.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Benin, as a range state of the species, would like to congratulate the proponents of this proposal. Given the growing demand in international trade for this species, we support the proposal, which will help in the sustainable conservation of the species. Thank you.
Thank you. Burkina Faso.
Faso félicite.
We'd like to congratulate the proponents of this proposal, and we fully support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. Now give the floor to Liberia, followed by the Congo, then Costa Rica.
Thank you, Chair. Given the massive pressure on this species, we better act now before it's too late. So Liberia is in full support of listing the species inside the Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liberia. I give the floor to the Congo, then Costa Rica.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Republic of Congo would like to maintain its position, and we are not in agreement with this proposal to list this species in Appendix 2. And as Congo has said, in Congo, we do not have pressures on this species. The exploitation is rational and managed, and studies have shown that the species is abundant in the forests of the Congo and also in the Southern African region. So we do not agree with the listing of this. We are a model country in terms of the sustainable management of our forestry resources. And I have said this, and I continue to say it, it's 0.06%, and we only remove 1 foot per hectare. And given all of these facts, Congo is also in the process of certifying our plans, and we have a digitized system for verification, so we see no reason to list this species in Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you. The Congo, I give the floor to Costa Rica.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. We'd like to congratulate the proponents, and we think it meets all the criteria for listing and inclusion in Appendix 2, and we support it 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Costa Rica. And Guinea-Bissau, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Guinea-Bissau, we seem to have a microphone missing. Guinea-Bissau has a great deal of potential in forestry resources, so we support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further requests for the floor from parties, so I will... Oh, I see the European Union. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to come back to some of the rain states. The species, in some countries, the species the genus is doing okay, but we would like to point out that in 90% of all studied populations, the species is in decline or is unstable. We would also like to thank Senegal for bringing these speaking notes. We would also like to point out that, as Senegal introduced, is to consider changing the standard reference for nomenclature to that of Q Plants of the World Online. Thank you.
And I see Argentina. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Argentina would like to say that we support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I give the floor to Mexico, followed by Peru.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Our delegation would also like to say that we support the inclusion of African species of Pterocarpus in Appendix 2, and in particular in light of the strong support of range states. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. I give the floor now to Peru.
Sí, gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Peru would like to express its support for the inclusion of African populations in Appendix 2. Thank you.
And I give the floor, finally, I think, to Kenya for parties.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya would support approval of the Proposal 50 on inclusion of Pterocarpus in Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further requests for the floor from parties, so I will invite any interventions from observers. So I see Environmental Investigation Agency from the United States.
Thank you, Chair. Since this is the first time we take the floor in this committee, we wish to thank the government of Panama for their warm welcome and congratulate Dr. Win Fleming on his election as chair. Environmental Investigation Agency, on behalf of itself, Center for International Environmental Law and Species Survival Network, wish to thank Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Malawi, Togo, and the European Union for tabling this proposal. EIA's numerous investigations on Pterocarpus erinaceus and tinctorius and others in multiple countries documented the vicious boom and bust cycle where the illicit logging and trafficking networks quickly react to new regulations moving swiftly from country to country, species to species. Criminal networks act faster than bureaucrats and comprehensive scientific assessments. And range states now rightly fear that the boom and bust that nearly extinguished Pterocarpus erinaceus will now repeat itself with the remaining unlisted species. If we have learned anything from past experience, it is that trees and the ecosystems and communities who depend on them cannot be saved by subsequently adding one related threatened species to CITES every 3 years. The African species of Pterocarpus genus listing on Appendix 2 meets the substantive conservation and lookalike criteria and is a logical, rational step to ensure legality and sustainability of trade in the future. We therefore urge parties to support the proposal, while also urging parties to provide range states with the needed support to implement the convention. We note that importing countries bear a particular responsibility here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EIA US, and I give the floor to Jean Bleu.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to speak on one specific species within the Pterocarpus species. I would like to make two observations. The first one, when we see the proposal, we are on Appendix 1, Table 1, and we see Annex 1, and we see that the species exploited in Central Africa is a species specific to Central Africa forests, and it's mostly in Nigeria where the species is present. So we can therefore see that none of the proponent countries of this proposal belongs to the area of distribution of this species of Pterocarpus. Also, in Annex 3 of that very same proposal, shows the correlation between the identification of the species of Pterocarpus and the anatomical traits of these species. What we see is that the Pterocarpus soyosi can be mistaken by other species, and actually that is really one of the focus of this proposal. But when we analyze the justifications of this botanical identification or anatomical identification of the wood, which is based on experts' evaluation. So I would like to say, are we going to make a decision on the trade of a specific species based on the species and not necessarily on an expert's opinion? So I would like to invite parties to maybe suggest one amendment so that we can remove these species, Pterocarpus soyosi, so that we can make sure that an genetic or anatomical evaluation of the wood be made, so that we can really make sure that this Pterocarpus species be mistaken by other Pterocarpus species that are present in any one of the countries proponent of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean Bleu. If you just give me one moment, please. So I see in the debate the proposal for using a standard nomenclature was suggested, which I think was the Q Plants of the World Online. And I wonder if the nomenclature specialists of the Plants Committee had any observations you might wish to make. You have the floor, if so.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that that decision was made in consultation with me, and Plants of the World Online, the classification and nomenclature proposed there is more up to date. It reflects the work from the Legume Phylogeny Working Group, which is a global consortium of Fabaceae experts. So we believe that the taxonomy and nomenclature of the Plants of the World Online is more globally accepted and more up to date than that reflected currently in the African Plants database.
Thank you for those helpful comments. Just a moment. Thank you. So I've been listening to debate, and clearly it seems to me that there is a lot of support in the room for this proposal. We have heard opposition and some reservations expressed on either the entire or parts of the proposal, especially from, well, in particular from the Congo and Cameroon. And I would just like to go back to those two countries to ask if you really want to block consensus here, or could you live with this proposal going forward, given the strength of support that we've heard expressed so far? So the Congo and Cameroon, I invite you to and I see the Congo came up first, so you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Science is universal, and I think that no one can afford saying that my thesis is the right one. When there are several positions, what we can say is that scientists need to agree. So no one is in a position to say that their own science or that everything they're putting forward is right. You have heard what the Belgian University of John Blue has said. We have also heard what has just been said by the madam who's preceded me. And I think it is simpler to say that what we need is for everybody to sit down and evaluate this issue. The Congo, I think you have said this afternoon that the Congo is a signatory of a voluntary agreement with the European Union to say that the Congo is a responsible state with more than 60% of FSC certified forests. That is the most stringent of certificates. FSC is forest, F for forest. In any case, this is the most stringent of certifications. And we must take all this into account. The equatorial forest is very rich, intact. In the diversity of the species within it. And we can say for those species that they're not threatened. The forestry industry is a responsible one and is only exploiting very little of it. Therefore, I would say the Congo will stand on its position and very much aligns with what the University of Belgium has said, and therefore we maintain our position. Thank you.
Thank you, the Congo. I now go to Cameroon and ask them the same question. Are they willing to live with a consensus? But you have the floor, Cameroon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's always good to encourage those who are proponents to a proposal, and we admit that any human activity can have an impact, as we have seen. We have taken a certain position. We are here in a differentiated treatment, and we would like to see differentiated insertions. Despite all the certificates that this will be creating, we are a little bit concerned, I have to say. And the second thing I would say is that I very much align myself with what my colleague has just said. The co-proponents of this proposal don't have the resources in their countries. Is that it's not going to create a debate within the convention? Does a proposal have to be proposed by those who have the resources? Those who have co-signed this proposal are not withholders of this resource, and none of the countries who have this resource have supported this proposal. Therefore, we have supported the inclusion of Pterocarpus in the appendix, because we see there is an illicit trade with certain transborder countries for this species. And as a matter of fact, we haven't even had the confirmation that this, the origin of this wood was from Cameroon. A little bit like the case of Benin or Madagascar. We have supported this insertion, but we support, but as a reply to your answer, Chair, Cameroon supports the inclusion of this species. Thank you.
So thank you, Cameroon, and thank you for your flexibility. It seems to me there's an overwhelming consensus in the room, with the exception of the Congo. And I'll look to you one more time. Just as a very quick answer, we can take this to a vote if that's what you want to do. But it does seem like the odds are perhaps stacked against you. But I will give you the option, and you could just simply let me know whether you still want to hold out against consensus or want to take this to a vote. So you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you have said, the Congo would lose out in case of a vote. I therefore go with the majority of those who have taken the floor in favor of the listing of the species. But I would like to alert you, we must be careful, and I think that we must take into account all the other scientific criteria or arguments that are being put forward. This is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, the Congo, and thank you for your flexibility. And of course, we understand the points you made, and both you and Cameroon. So we do note and respect those comments. But I think I can conclude here that Proposal 50 is adopted by consensus. So having said that, again, I will sort out my papers and... So clearly there's a consensus. I think we are just looking for clarification, actually, to go back to the nomenclature specialist of the Plants Committee. If you could just be very sort of precise about what the proposed standard nomenclature reference would be for this proposal so that we have it in the record correctly. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the Plants of the World Online would be the best reference to use for the Pterocarpus species, and the proponents of the proposal has also agreed that that might be the best solution.
Okay, thank you, nomenclature specialist of the Plants Committee. And with that clarification, we adopt Proposal 50 by consensus. Thank you all for your cooperation, and we will move on, once I got my papers sorted out, to Proposal 51. One moment. So, Proposal 51 is a proposal to list African populations of the genus Kaya in CITES Appendix 2. There is a kind of a document associated with it, which is document 84.3 on standard nomenclature for Kaya, and once we've considered the proposal, we will then move on to consider that document. The proponent countries are Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, the European Union, Liberia, and Senegal. And I will invite one of you to introduce the proposal, please. So I see the European Union. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We are glad to present to you Proposal 51 for the inclusion of the genus Kaya in Appendix 2. Firstly, of course, we would like to thank the co-proponents, Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, Liberia, and Senegal for their support. Kaya is a genus of three species occurring in tropical and subtropical forests of West and Central Africa, Madagascar and the Comoros. Kaya species are traded internationally as African mahogany or acajou and are targeted for their highly valuable hardwood timber, which is used in construction and boat building and for paneling, flooring and furniture. The European Union is one of the key importers of Kaya. Whilst available trade data is largely under the common name African mahogany, which does include other taxa, it is clear that Kaya is highly traded internationally, with Kaya iverensis being a key species on the EU market. Over 130,000 tons of African mahogany was exported from range stage in the period between 2007 and 2014. Inclusion in Appendix 2 would allow for better monitoring of trade in Kaya than is currently available using HS commodity codes. Kaya species generally occur at low densities, and ongoing wild harvest for the international timber market is the primary threat to the genus, which is having a detrimental effect on natural populations that are particularly vulnerable as a result of intrinsic poor regeneration rates. 5 species have been assessed as vulnerable in the IUCN Red List on the basis of overexploitation for timber and loss of mature trees, leading to poor regeneration. Kaya madagascariensis was most recently assessed by the IUCN in 2020, and it has undergone a 30% decline in 3 generations due to timber harvest. Similarly, in Côte d'Ivoire, the volume of African mahogany exported declined by 90% between 2012 and 2019, from a peak of 42 million cubic meters, reflecting a dwindling national resource. 5 species, namely Kaya anthotheca, Grandiflora ivorensis, madagascariensis, and senegalensis, meet the criteria for listing in Appendix 2 and the criterion B of Annex 2A of Conference Resolution 9.24. Given the difficulties with wood identification to species level and noting the taxonomic issues outlined in the proposal, the criteria for inclusion of the genus Kaya in Appendix 2 under criterion A of Annex 2B also are met. As we foresee difficulties with implementation of these proposals, as for Pterocarpus, we can suggest the option of having a delayed implementation of this listing. We therefore invite parties to support the adoption of Proposal 51 to include the genus Kaya in Appendix 2 with annotation 17, which would designate all timber commodities, including logs, sawnwood, veneer sheets, plywood, and transformed wood. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I now open the floor for comments by parties. And I see Liberia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the importance of this species in the environment, we have come to notice over the years that this species, especially Liberia, was one of the native areas you could find these species, and they were heavily traded within our timber industry. As we see for now, it's no longer seen among the timber species that leave our various countries. And you only go into the wild, you see the wildlings, and the wildlings are not much seen much. Looking at that, and the severity and the threat that are associated with the species, it is now time for us to call for actions and take action, immediate action, to be able to save the remaining population of the species and to better preserve it for conservation purpose. So Liberia support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Liberia. I'll give the floor now to Mauritania, then Cameroon.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Mauritania would like to congratulate the proponents of this proposal for the clear and sincere commitment and the participation and efforts to the preservation of nature worldwide. And for this reason, Mauritania once more would like to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauritania. I give the floor to Cameroon, and then I see the Gambia, and then Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. We take the floor once more. The Cameroon's position remains the same with regards to the differentiated treatment that we are suggesting for the listing of the species and the difficulty of managing species as a block of the genera. So Cameroon's position remains the same. So the genus Kaya not be listed in Appendix 1, and that further studies be carried out in order to be able to see what threats face this genus and the different species in international trade in order to make a proposal, a long-lasting proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. So I think I said I'd give the floor to the Gambia, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Gambia also is one of the range states of the Kaya. So therefore, considering the importance of these species in our ecology and also the socio-economic importance of it, so listing it into the CITES appendix will only enhance and strengthen the conservation efforts of the management department of the country. So therefore, the Gambia is with the position to support the proposal to be adopted in the CITES appendix. Thank you.
Thank you, the Gambia. I think give the floor to Nigeria, then Tanzania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to lend my voice to say Nigeria is also a range state, and also we support that this species be listed, as proposed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. I give the floor to Tanzania, then Senegal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor to comment on this proposal number 51. The United Republic of Tanzania, being among the range states of Kaya species, supports the proposal on listing of Kaya species in Appendix 2. However, as mahogany tree species are widely spread in the tropics, the listing is only to African population. There might be some challenges in identification of the species of the genus through anatomical methods during intercontinental trade. Therefore, we call for the range states and the relevant stakeholders to support in capacity building on appropriate wood identification technologies and traceability. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tanzania. I give the floor to Senegal, and that is the last final party to request the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. We support this proposal.
Senegal, dans nos forêts.
This species is found in Senegal, but the exploitation is solely used in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I see now Burkina Faso.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. once again, we would like to support the proposal, given that the listing in Appendix 2 is to ensure traceability and sustainable management. So we therefore would support this proposal and congratulate the proponents. Thank you.
Thank you. Burkina Faso, there are no more requests for the floor from parties, so I'll invite any interventions from observers. So I see two requests, the first from CIEL, followed by the International Wood Products Association. CIEL, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first intervention by the Center for International Environmental Law, I would like to thank the government of Panama for their warm welcome and congratulate you, Mr. Chair, on your election and deft handling of Committee 1 thus far. A full taxonomic revision is underway and addressed by proposed decisions in document 84.3. Although there are outstanding taxonomic issues, at least 3, if not all, species in the Kaya genus meet the listing criteria on substantive conservation grounds, with the remainder of the genus qualifying on look-alike grounds. Indeed, Kaya species are heavily exploited, indistinguishable from one another, and often used as a substitute for American mahogany. Both legal and illegal harvest for the international timber market in China, the US, and the EU is the primary threat. As such, we urge parties to support the proposal to list the Kaya genus on Appendix 2 with annotation 17 and to secure the future for these slow-growing trees with low densities, short-term seed viability, and high seedling mortality. We also urge parties, and importing parties in particular, to provide range states with the support needed to implement this listing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CIEL. I go now to the International Wood Products Association.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of the International Wood Products Association, as well as on behalf of the Sustainable Use Coalition of Southern Africa. Similar to Proposition 48, IWPA is concerned that Proposition 51 does not meet the standard for inclusion in CITES Appendix 2, namely that it cannot be known or inferred or projected that regulation of trade in the species is required to ensure the harvest of specimens from the wild is not reducing the wild population to a level at which its survival might be threatened by continued harvesting or other influences. As with other timber proposals before the committee this week, importers in the United States and the EU, which are the primary export markets for Kaya, already comply with robust laws and enforcement with regards to the importation of timber, such as the Lacey Act in the United States. Parties should also consider the positions of all exporting parties, some of which have to date not indicated support for the proposal. IWPA does not believe that this proposal should be advanced and would request a vote of no from the parties. However, if this proposition is adopted, IWPA would suggest 2 things. 1, that this listing should be carefully tailored to, wherever possible, avoid regulating products derived from plantations, which are not of conservation concern, as there are a significant number of Kaya plantations that have been established in Africa and other tropical regions. And 2, IWPA would also echo the European Union's acknowledgement that implementation might be difficult, and therefore would urge support for a 12-month implementation period, as the EU mentioned being a possibility. Thank you for the opportunity to share our perspective.
Thank you, International Wood Products Association. I think with this proposal, we're in a similar position to the previous one, where there's been a range of support expressed by parties, and I'm reading silence in the room really to not indicate opposition to the proposal. So I think again, Cameroon, I'd come back to you and say, in the interest of consensus, are you willing to accept the proposal as it is in front of us now, recognizing, as always, that the comments that you've made and concerns you've expressed. So I'd be grateful for your sort of indication, really, as to whether you could live with adopting this proposal by consensus. So thank you, Cameroon.
Une fois de plus, merci.
Once more, thank you, Chair. You have already ascertained that if we go to a vote, we will lose, but we maintain what we've said, that we have to go further in depth with the studies because each species is in a different position. And we have always repeated that we want it to be noted that the range states, the holders of the resource, must be able to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon, and thank you for your cooperation. And again, I think all your comments are noted and recognized. But on, again, I think the feeling in the room is clearly in support overall. So thank you for your willingness to live with a consensus, which means that we can adopt this proposal as it stands. Having done so, we can then move to document 84.3, which is a standard nomenclature for Kaya species, which is proposed by the European Union and its member states, and I invite you to introduce that. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We note the taxonomy of the genus Kaya remains unresolved, and in order to avoid any misinterpretation of the listing, the EU has submitted document 84.3 on standard nomenclature for Kaya species. In this document, we propose the adoption of 2 existing references to the COP by Buca et al. In 2017 and 2022, until a full taxonomic revision of the genus could be completed. However, since the publication of that working document, the Plants of the World online database from Kew has resurrected to the rank of species Kaya agboensis and Kaya europhilia and Kaya nyassica. And we therefore recommend that the Plants of the World online portal, Plants of the World Online, is used as the interim reference to assist the parties with the implementation. This approach is also supported by the nomenclature specialist of the Plants Committee. Document 84.3 also directs the Plants Committee to consider and evaluate the nomenclature issues related to Kaya and provide recommendations to COP20. The European Union and its member states agreed to the minor proposed edits to these decisions by the Secretariat as outlined in the document. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, European Union. I open the floor for comments by parties. I don't see any, so I will invite any comments by observers. And again, I don't see any, so Jean Bleu, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to contribute to the discussion. When we observe the nomenclature, it is generally based on the publications of Mr. Buka, and in particular on the last publication, Buka et al. 2022, a scientific publication based on genetic data. Knowing the authors, this nomenclature or difference of species currently is based only on DNA, on genetic information. But there is information on the architectural characteristics based on work in the field. So I would like to call on the Conference of the Parties. I don't know if it's an annotation that we could submit so that we can decide on that on the nomenclature without awaiting the results of research on the morphological characteristics that are being carried out on Kaya. So I suggest we await those. Thank you.
So thank you, Jean Bleu, and thank you for your suggestion. Our understanding is that with document 84.3, there is a standard nomenclature reference proposed, but there are also then decisions which enable the Plants Committee to consider and evaluate nomenclature issues related to Kaya, and to, if need be, propose recommendations to the next conference of the parties. So I would hope that that combination is sufficient to satisfy your concerns or address your suggestion. I thought I saw Senegal, but that's fine. So I think with that, and without any requests on the floor from parties or differences of opinion, I think we can consider the proposals contained in document 84.3 with the suggested standard nomenclature reference and the draft decisions as amended by the Secretariat to be adopted. So we will continue with plant proposals. We still have a bit of time left to us, so we make best use of it. We will go on to proposal 43, which is flora species with annotation #1, #4, #14, and Appendix 1 listed species of Orchidaceae, and this proposal is the proponent for this is Canada. So Canada, I invite you to introduce this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. CoP19 Proposal 43, submitted by Canada, seeks the amendment of the text of annotations #1, 4, and 14, and the parenthetical annotation to Appendix 1 Orchidaceae in the appendices, in all cases to delete the text, comma, in solid or liquid media. The amendment as proposed will harmonize all occurrences of the phrase in solid or liquid media in the CITES appendices and in # series annotations, And I note, Mr. Chair, that recommendation A of document 85.1 on annotations, report of the Standing Committee, was adjourned for discussion with this element of the proposal. In addition, for annotation #14, in order to align the punctuation and vocabulary of English, French, and Spanish versions of the annotation, the proposal seeks to amend paragraph F of the English text of the annotation by replacing the comma after finished products packaged and ready for retail trade with a semicolon, and paragraph F of the French text of paragraph F to read as follows: F. Les produits finis conditionnels et prêts pour la vente au détail. Cette dérogation ne s'applique pas aux copeaux de bois, aux pearls, aux graines de chapelet, et aux gravures. These amendments are proposed to reflect the technical evolution in the propagation and transport of seedling or tissue cultures obtained in vitro while maintaining the original intent of the exemption. As such, they are proposed to facilitate interpretation by customs and enforcement authorities of the annotations referenced without altering the level of protection for any species. This proposal reflects the outcome of discussions of the Standing Committee Working Group on Annotations and is made in accordance with the consensus recommendation made by the Standing Committee at its 74th meeting in Lyon in March of 2022. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada, and thank you for your introduction and making this proposal as an outcome of the Standing Committee Working Group, which Canada chaired. So we're very grateful for your chairmanship of that and for the work of the Working Group. Clearly, it's been subject to a lot of work already, and I'm hoping that perhaps parties will be ready to adopt this. And as you rightly recognized, once we have finished with this proposal, then we will go on to document 85.1 and the item that we adjourned from whatever day it was when we last discussed it. I have no idea. So with that, I will open the floor for any comments from parties. I will take silence as indicating consent, so you don't need to raise your flag if you're happy with the document. Oh, I see United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports the proposed amendments related to tissue culture to reflect changes to techniques while maintaining the original intent of the exemption. To ensure the original intent is maintained, the United States recommends that it be noted for the record that with regard to exceptions for seedling and tissue cultures obtained in vitro, transported in sterile containers, comma, seedlings or tissue cultures taken out of sterile containers no longer qualify for the exception included in the annotations, comma, regardless of purpose, period. According to Resolution Conf 1111, Rev. COP 18, paragraph 11, the country in which the specimens are removed from sterile containers is then the country of origin. This is also noted in the report of the Standing Committee's Working Group on Annotations, SC 74, Doc 81, paragraph 7. The United States also supports adoption of minor amendments to annotation number 14, paragraph F, to address inconsistencies across the English, Spanish, and French translations. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. And if you could provide us with that text, then we can make sure it's entered into the record of the meeting. And I see you nodding. I see no requests on the floor from parties. I will offer the opportunity for observers if they wish, but again, if people are happy with this, I will take silence as consent. And with that, I will open, I will say that we have adopted Proposal 43 by consensus. And I will move on to reopen document 85.1, which, as Canada pointed out, we adjourned some time ago, and the recommendation, paragraph 10A, and of course we couldn't adopt that recommendation until Proposal 43 had been determined. So I am hoping that given the agreement that we just had on Proposal 43, that we can just adopt the recommendation in paragraph 10A of document 85.1. Again, I will take silence as consent. I don't see any requests from the floor from parties, and I assume none from observers either. So that brings our consideration of document 85.1 to a conclusion with the adoption of the recommendation in paragraph 10A. Just let me check the time and where we're up to and see if we can make any further progress. We've made quite a bit of progress tonight, and we probably don't have time to open up any more documents. So with that, we can close this session and allow you all to go home about 10 minutes early. We return to our agenda as in the working program tomorrow morning, and I can't find it immediately, but it's the same that the Rev 2 version. And Secretariat, you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just one announcement. The African Regional Group will meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow in room America 3. Sounds a bit of a tough announcement at this time of night, but there it is, Chair. Africa Regional Group, 8 a.m. America 3. Thank you.
So with that, I will close this session. Good night, and thank you for your perseverance and sticking with us to the end. And thank you, the interpreters, and technical support also. Thank you.